Welcome to the Got Game University podcast, Just the Tip Tuesday. Ryan and Mike here with you, and we are super excited. Mike's going to discuss his early season success with his boy. They got an elk down, and, Mike, he's, lots of times we think of him as like a host on this show, shooting the breeze with me, talking, but he's actually our Cut Right mobile app expert. So when it comes to processing, butchering, you know, recipes, when it comes to the meat side of the animal, he knows a thing or two. And we're really lucky to have him today because, we're going to focus on that a lot. And we're lucky to have his expertise. But we do want to get started with that awesome elk hunting story with his son. I think you'll have some laughs, and I laughed a lot when he told me about it.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this story with my 14-year-old is a bigger meathead than I am, not in terms of understanding meat and meat science and everything, but just a meathead alpha male 14-year-old, just that kind of kid, raising confident young men. And I'm not shy about that. I'm super proud of both my boys and how they're growing up. So there will be some beeped out words in this, because if I'm going to make some quotes, there was definitely when Luke and I hunt, we don't have a language barrier. And I'm not talking he speaks Spanish and I speak English. I'm talking any word is free to use when we're hunting because mom's not around. So I will give you the true story of the hunt, and I'm sure our fantastic editor, Jack, will either beep out the words or you'll hear slight pauses in the words that come out. So, but I appreciate that intro, Ryan. That was, I do appreciate it, man. I've been my background, as I've been butchering. I run a mobile butchering business up here in Northern Idaho, and I've been butchering professionally for a while, but my whole life since I've been 11, and been teaching anatomy and physiology for 20 years. And yeah, so I appreciate it.
Before you go into the story, I want to focus on the anatomy and physiology a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I don't think a lot of people, when it comes to the science of animals and elk and people, I don't think they realize that all animals have the same anatomy, correct?
There's a few minute differences here and there, but for the most part, if you were to bend over and walk on all fours, like bear crawl, your anatomy and the muscles are pretty much the exact same muscles you're going to see on a deer or an elk. They're more developed in certain areas on a deer and an elk than they are us, because we're bipedal. We walk on two legs. But if we were to bend down and bear crawl for the rest of our life, we would develop those muscles. And yeah, we all have pretty much the same muscles. And it makes it real easy transitioning from human anatomy and physiology to, ungulate, and any other anatomy and physiology, whether it's a quadruped, four-legged animal, or a biped, two-legged animal. We all share very similar, the same characteristics. You'll notice bears, even though they walk on all fours, they have different anatomy than elk and deer do. Just because of what they do and how they live, they pull on different things. So certain muscles get a lot bigger on bears than they do on elk and deer, because elk and deer use those hooves and those paws, if you will, to walk, whereas bears actually use them to climb things and pull rocks over and dig for grubs. And so different muscles are bigger, but they all have the same muscles. So yeah, it works really well. So when I'm on the Cut Right app, or posting Instagram videos or whatever, going over it, I can tell you, when I make a mistake, I will delete the Instagram video or delete it or whatever. And, oftentimes we don't really review our stuff until we post it. So it may be posted for 5 seconds and somebody may see it and be like, where the hell did that video go? Because I'll look at it and be like, oh, I made a mistake. I just misspoke because I was speaking too fast. But I can tell you on that Cut Right app, that there's no mistakes on that. Yes, there might be a misspelled word in the recipes. I caught one the other day and I was pretty frustrated with myself for letting that skip by. But in regards to anatomy and physiology, there's not mistakes. And as you and I have talked before, there's a lot of videos out there right now being posted with, because hunting season is coming up, doing your own butchering, doing your own thing with the animal, et cetera. And that's why we put together the Cut Right app, because we want the hunters to keep everything in their own hand. We want them to be self-sufficient. We want them to take super big advantage of these resources that we have, not just in Idaho, but Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, wherever you choose to hunt. I mean, Wisconsin, like I don't care. Like the deer over there, Iowa, like do it all yourself. And I can tell you, I've been watching those videos and, combined, they have a couple million followers and have had 1 million plus views on those videos. And I watch them like, oh my gosh, they totally did that wrong. They not only did they do it wrong, they gave them the wrong muscles, and then they gave them the wrong, like, things they're supposed to do with them. Like, you definitely should make steaks out of that one. So I would say, and not trying to be cocky or confident or whatever, we put this together for the hunters because we want them to honor their kill the best that they can. And we don't have mistakes on that app when it comes to that. That app is clean. Yes, we're going to get new content, and we're always trying to kill more animals to get better content, new content. But what's on there, you can take it to the bank. You can look it up in a textbook. You can take it to, Jeremy Christensen over at Hunt Chef or whatever and ask him, like, what we have on there is correct. Like, and we put it out there for the people because we want them to honor it. That's why we're there. Like, we want to help them and have them honor their kill as best as they can.
Right. No, totally makes sense. And, that's what we're about, is putting out good
100%.
content. And that's kind of the focus of the podcast too. Hopefully you guys get some funny stories, some laughs, and some really good content from us. Like I said, Mike's the expert on the app. We're just the ones that build the apps. So I'm no expert by any means, but
if you see my Instagram page, I'm not an expert on Instagram, so I do my best. But let's get into this elk hunt with Luke. So it was opening day. We have a tag that you are allowed to take advantage of a cow or a young spike. We choose cow. You make a choice in the field within a mile, and they're calling it now an agricultural field. So Idaho Fish and Game has redefined. It used to be a cultivated field, and they changed that to agriculture, which you'll have to look at the regs to see all that includes, and it has to be within a mile of that. So we hunt public land. I am not opposed to hunting private land. If anybody wants to hit me up in northern Idaho and say they have a herd of elk that are eating their hay for their horses, like, let me know. I'll be there in a jiffy. But we found an area of public land that the elk frequent and are pretty consistent year after year within a mile, actually well within a mile of a cultivated or agricultural field. And so this year, Luke and I left the house at 2:45 a.m. We drove down to where we were hunting, and we got to the area about 30 minutes early. We sat in the car, just shooting the breeze, getting excited for the day, like, okay, if they're not at point A, they'll be at point B, and then we have C, D, and E to follow it up. And if we haven't had anything killed, being it's early summer, here's a pro tip on this podcast for you, or late summer, early season. If you know it's going to be a hot day, you have to have a terminal time. You have to have a time where if we haven't killed an animal by this time, we're not going to kill an animal till the evening, or we'll come back tomorrow, because there's just comes a certain time where the sun's going to get too high, the temperature's going to get too hot, everything's going to be really bad conditions to field dress that animal. So our terminal time on this hunt, because it takes me about 45 minutes to field dress an elk by myself, and with Luke there holding the legs and doing some cuts when I need him to, it's even faster, like 40 minutes to get an elk completely done. And that is all the cuts on the animal. And I know some of the listeners may hear that and think, Jesus Christo, like that is ridiculously fast. How can you do that? The amount of animals that we field dressed and I field dressed in my day is an awful lot. So I've done it so much. It's, and I got to experience this time. I'm clearly able to do it with just one hand, extended it an entire length and not even feeling my landmarks. And I'll get into that. So sun rose at 5:26. Legal shooting light would have been 4:56, 1/2 hour before the sun rises. So we're sitting on the tailgate. I'm drinking coffee, and Luke's sitting there. And we wandered into the woods to do our business so that we didn't have to do it while we were hunting, to be a couple pounds lighter as we're walking through. And he comes back out. It's 4:32 in the morning. He says, "Hey, Dad, what time are we leaving? Let's go." And I was like, No, we're gonna leave at 4:38. And he looked at me with shock, and he's like, "Pretty specific on the time there, aren't you, there, buddy?" And I was like, "Well, I know exactly how long it takes to walk quietly into the spot, and I want to be where I think the elk are going to be at the very first minute of shootable light. That way, if they're there, you can knock an animal down the very first minute of shootable light, and that gives us more time with an appropriate temperature and everything to field dress the animal." Says, "Okay." So we're sitting there shooting the breeze. 4:38 comes along. We start walking in and get about 300 yards down the trail, and something moves off to the right, and I stop them. And now I want to preface, like, the previous year's hunts with Luke, he's been hunting 4 or 5 years now with me, leading the hunts. I used to call him Captain Crunch because he would find every stick, every rock, every piece of dry leaf. He would step on it, and I would just, every time I walk, I'm like, "Oh my God, Luke, like if you could possibly make more noise, that would be great." And he would always look at me. And this is also the kid that last year, or a couple years ago on a deer hunt, quiet as a field mouse, shot his deer. And then when it was my turn to hunt, we're sitting behind a rock just glassing a field, and he pulls out an aluminum foil bag of Cheetos and starts eating aluminum foil bag. And I'm like, "Luke, seriously, what the F, dude?" And he's like, "What? They can't hear this." And whereas like the day before when it was his hunt, he was yelling at me for breathing out of my nose because it made too much noise. So we're walking in, and this little thing moves on the side, and I was like, "Oh, stop." And he's like, "Dad, it's a freaking bunny." And I was like, "I don't care if it's a bunny or a bird or whatever. If you scare it, it could run over and scare elk, and then they all blow out." And he's like, "Whatever, old man." And I was like, "All right, just keep walking." So he walks, and I pause him, and it's now like 4:46, and remember 4:56 is legal shooting light. And I said, "Hey, as soon as we get up to that corner, it's like game on. Like the elk may be coming out in this area." He's like, "Okay." And so we very slowly make our way up. We get to the corner, and he goes first. He stops, and he's like, "There's an elk." And I look, and I was like, "All right." And I look at my watch, and it's 4:57, so we're legal shooting light. And I said, "Well, if you want that one, go ahead and take it." And so he takes his pack off. He gets the bipod on the gun. He drops down, and he says, "Wait a minute, there's more coming down the road." And there were 2 cows and 2 calves coming down the road, an old logging road. And I couldn't see him. And he's like, "I just see the ears." And I looked, I saw the ears, then all 4 animals popped up. And so they start walking down the road, and I was like, "Well, take whatever one you want. Like, I'd prefer you not to shoot a calf this year, but they're tasty, so I don't care. Whatever one you want to shoot, it doesn't matter to me, man. They're all legal." And they're walking, so he's very good at picking his shot and waiting till he can have a kill shot. And they're walking towards us. We first spotted him at 280 yards. They're walking towards us, walking. He's prone. We snake up another 10 yards. He's prone. And the road kind of curves away, so I can't see the road. And they walk down that road, and I was like, "Oh, shoot." They went up the hill. And I'm glassing up on the side of this hill where the logging road is. And he's prone, and I'm kind of kneeling. And he's like, "There they are." And I was like, "Where?" And okay, listener, Jack, you're going to have to beep some of this. He's like, "Right fucking there." And I was like, "Right fucking where?" And he's like, "Dad, you could throw a damn rock at him." And I looked, and they were standing like 100 yards away, just staring right at us. Like they clearly wanted to come down the road. And I was like, oh, okay. And he whispers, like, which one should I take? And I said, take the one on the right. Because it was cow, calf, calf, cow. And I said, take the one on the right. He says, okay. And I said, take a front. And I got FR of the frontal out. And then boom. And I'm like looking at them, and they all turned. None of them, they didn't sprint, but they turned and kind of jogged away. Even the one that I thought he was going to shoot. And I looked at him and I said, you freaking missed. And he's like, the gun just went off. And I looked at him and I said, the gun doesn't just go off. There's an accu trigger on it. It's a Savage. You got to pull the accu trigger before the trigger actually pulls back. The gun doesn't go off. And he's like, the gun just went off. I swear to God, I just barely touched it. The gun went off. And I said, Luke, just shut the fuck up. Like, the gun doesn't go off. And he looks at me and he's like, oh, me shut the fuck up, right? And I was like, I'm not mad, dude. I know it sounds like I'm mad. I'm not mad at all. If the gun went off, like, that sucks. Last year it didn't go off. This year it goes off. I don't care how it happened. I was like,
but be quiet.
Just shut up. The elk ran up the hill. We're going to go around the corner. They're probably standing on top of the hill. We'll get another shot. And he's like, oh, okay. And I was like, okay. So we walk about 50 yards along the logging road. You can get around that bend. And there was a beautiful big cow laying in the logging road, dead. And I just turned, he was right behind me. I looked, I was like, oh, well, one's dead right here. And he looked at me, he's like, I knew I shot her. And I looked at him and said, what the heck do you mean you knew you shot her? You said the gun went off. He's like, yeah, the gun didn't go off. I shot her. And I said, why'd you tell me the gun went off? And he's like, I didn't want to ruin my streak of being 7 for 7. In case I did miss, I didn't want to ruin my streak. and I said, dude, okay, I get that. I said, but at the same time, if you knew you hit her, you need to let me know, like, hey, Dad, I'm pretty sure I hit her. That way I would know to look for blood, because I didn't even look for blood 10 yards back where she was standing. I walked right over the blood because I was focused on the thing. He's like, okay, yeah, I got that. But I didn't want to ruin my streak of being 7 for 7. I was like, all right, fair enough. So we get there. The animals.
I wish I was 7 for 7.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be amazing? Well, I mean, Ryan, he shares common blood with you. I mean, the kid, like, I was not prepared for him to shoot. Most people, when they're behind a gun or whatever, will look at their partner and be like, okay, I'm going, and like let you know they're about to pull the trigger. Nah. I mean, when he has his shot, you could be standing 5 feet in front of the muzzle, 8 feet behind. He's pulling that trigger. He doesn't give a damn where anybody else is. If it's a clean shot with a good backdrop and a safe shot, if it blows your eardrums out, that's your fault for being in the wrong spot. He pulls that damn trigger.
That's me. It's your fault if I'm in the gun and you're not ready. It's not my fault.
100%. And
because once that elk hits my window, they can take a step real fast and you can lose it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not going to turn and tell you, like, I'm in the gun, be ready.
Yeah. And that's his thing. Like, if I'm down on the gun and it's shouldered and my eyes in that scope, it's live. Like, be ready for the bullet to go anytime. Be ready for that crack anytime. So we get there, take a couple pictures, celebrate, hug, do our thing, and get to cutting. And so he shot that elk. It was probably somewhere between 5:02 and 5:04 a.m. So legal hunting, it was six minutes of legal hunting light, like minus the walk in. So it was a 6-minute hunt. And it was a little anticlimactic for him, but I put the scouting time in to figure out where they were for him. So we started field dressing the animal. And this is where some of the points where we're going to discuss after this, and I'll wrap this up in the next 3 minutes. Start field dressing the animal. No bees around. Everything's fine. We have an hour and a half before the sun hits us. I'm like, oh, this is going to be cake. And it's on a flat logging road. I'm like, it might as well be on my butcher table. It's going to be so easy, right? Like, I'm so excited. And so I get the cuts down the spine, up the back leg, up the front leg. I'm pulling it. A couple yellow jackets show up, nothing big. As soon as I get that skin pulled off and those, blood vessels right between the skin and the the muscles become exposed. I don't think we were on a yellow jacket nest, but there were so many yellow jackets. I've never seen something like this in my life. Luke was like, Dad, I'll cut wherever you want me to cut. And I said, this is what I need you to do. I said, I'm going to do this whole side by myself. I'll just hold it against my shoulder and do it. I need you standing and with your hat, swinging your hat violently, like something is mentally wrong with you, like trying to get the yellow jackets away from me. He's like, okay, I can do that. And so he's
You can get stung, son. But
yeah,
make sure they don't get me.
right, because I'm dealing with the meat, so I don't give a shit about you, kid. And so he's swinging violently, and it turned out not to be a good idea. And I get the hind quarter off, and I don't get stung on the hind quarter. And then I get as I'm going on the front quarter, and I wanted to get the rib roll and the brisket and everything because it was in such a good spot. And his shot was frontal, so it went, chest, top of the heart, lung, and didn't come out. So all the meat was perfect. So I was like, I'm getting brisket, I'm getting rib roll, I'm getting everything. As I was getting the front quarter off, I must have got stung probably 6 or 7 times on the hands and arms. And I was like, okay. And every time it stings, it hurts. Right. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
I'm just going fast, and I get the front leg off. We get them in game bags. Now I'm at the back strap. There are so many yellow jackets that I actually stopped, and I looked at Luke, and he's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I didn't know there was a running creek down there. I didn't know there was running water near here." And he stopped and listened, and he looks at me, and I can't say what he called me on, on a podcast, but he was like, "You R word, those are the yellow jackets." And I was like, "Oh my, that's the yellow jackets?" He's like, "Yeah, I can hear them like over here." Right, though, it does sound like a river. That's how many there were, like hundreds. And so I managed to get the back strap off, keeping that animal at arm's length, just using my knife, not feeling my landmarks, anything, just kind of going through it, and managed to get all the back strap. I was surprised at how clean it was. And so then we get the neck, and we flip the animal over. And I peel the skin down, and I start on the hind quarter. And now I've been stung probably 10, 11 times. And I pause for a second, and he looks at me, he's like, "Dad, you okay?" And I was like, I felt better. I felt better. And he's like, "You don't, just take a breather. We don't need to, like, just take a few minutes." And I just said, "Bud, it's only going to get worse. Like, I'll get through this. Keep swinging your hat, hold this leg for me." So I took the whole hind quarter off again. Like, if you can imagine, one hand sticking out, other hand like swatting bugs away, just knowing where my landmarks are. Again, that top round sirloin tip line leads you right to that ball joint. I just cut right down there. I got to the pelvis, I shaved it, I know where the H bone is, blah blah blah. Got the whole hind quarter off, got the front quarter off, got stung probably another 5 or 6 times, got the back strap off, didn't get stung there, got the neck off. And now, so I'm like probably, I don't know what, like 14 stings, something like that. And I was like, all right. And he's like, "Dad, we're good. We don't get any more." And I was like, no, bud. Like, I don't like the tenderloins. We're getting the tenderloins. So I dove in. I got one tenderloin out, and I rolled her over, and I went to get the other tenderloin out. And when I put my hands in there, like 3 of my fingers immediately got tagged, like boom, boom, boom. And I looked, and I was like, I'm not getting that other tenderloin, like, because it was on the tips of my fingers too. So they like ballooned up immediately to the size of marbles. And I was like, this is stupid. And this is so stupid. And we had all the meat except the heart. And I pulled one of the ribs out and looked, and the cavity was filled with a bunch of blood. And I could see the heart kind of floating, kind of sinking in there. But there was also probably 10 or 12 yellow jackets swimming in like the forearm deep blood in there. And Luke looked at it. He's like, "Dad, don't worry about it. You don't have to get the heart." And I looked at him and I said, "The hell I don't. We love the heart. Like, I'm absolutely getting that. This is going to be horrible though. And I know I'm going to get stung. Just have the bag." And he's like, "Okay, I'm ready." And so I ripped, it was the last thing I was getting because I got everything else. So I was okay with dulling my knife blade on that bone, ripped a rib out, both hands into the chest cavity, grabbed the heart. It was already disconnected from the vessels because his bullet ripped through the top of the heart. Pulled it up as I'm holding this heart, and look at the Instagram page. It's the biggest heart I've ever had on an elk. I mean, the thing was like the size of an oversized cantaloupe or a small watermelon. It was huge. I pick it up and I start yelling. He's like, Dad, you are yelling like 9-year-old schoolgirl. And I was like, bro, I was getting stung on my palms and everything carrying this heart. I took off running down this logging road. And he's like, where are you going? I was like, just bring the effing bag. Just get the bag. Like, he comes next to me. I toss the heart in rugby ball style into the bag. My hands, I'm like covered in blood and like have these wasps, like yellow jackets stinging me. I was like, God, this is freaking horrible. And I still had to get the ivories, but there was no blood coming out of the mouth or the head. So they were all from the head back. So pulled the ivories out pretty fast, drug it off of the logging road down into, the cut wood and stuff like that to get it off. And so I counted about 17 stings, maybe 18. And, we said, all right, we're pretty close to the car. I'm not going to say how far we were. We were pretty close to the car. We said, we'll put a hind quarter in each of our packs. We'll each carry a front quarter. Luke will carry the gun and I'll carry the loose meat bag, which is probably 60 pounds or so of loose meat. And so we're just going to farmer carry the front quarter and the loose meat, and he'll do the front quarter and the gun, and the packs have the hind quarter. I got about 200 yards down the road and he stops. He's like, hey, you okay? And I was like, I'm not. No, I'm not feeling too good. I'm actually not okay. I'm not okay at all. And he's like, okay, just set the bag and the front quarter down in the shade. Like, just let's get to the car. So he takes off. Go ahead.
I was like, getting that heart stopped yours. Irony.
Mm-hmm. Oh, dude. And so he gets to the truck like 10 minutes before me. He's already on his way back up. And I get to cross him in the trail. He's like, Dad, just get to the car, get everything in the back of the truck, get the meat in the cooler, like take care of that. I'll be back in like 10 minutes. And I was like, I'll come help you. And he's like, sure. And so I get to the truck. I'm not well, like not feeling good at all. Get everything put away, grab a bottle of water, start walking back, get like maybe 150 feet down the trail. He's coming back carrying like the extra meat bag in the front quarter, like a baby in his arms, like not farmer carrying. I was like, why aren't you farmer carrying that? He's like, it's easier this way. Just covered in blood, like dripping off of him, like looks like a freaking savage out there. So the kid saved his old man's butt. Like it's a point of honor to have your kid like surpass you in fitness and all that stuff. But it's also a very humbling experience. And like, so we get everything put away. And he's like, are you going to be okay to drive home? And I said, well, if I'm not, you know how to drive. And he said, Dad, you've let me drive around the neighborhood in Mom's car going 20 miles per hour. And I'm like, yeah, the truck on the freeway going 65 is about the same thing. You'll be all right if you need to. We'll figure it out. And fortunately, we kind of sat there, and I drink a couple like old school Pepsis or Cokes with a bunch of sugar in them, and, ate some food. It was the stings. I mean, I got stung on my head, on my neck, on my back, on my arms, on my hands. It was bad. And we get back home. So we left the house that morning at 2:45. We were driving back home at 7:40 in the morning, and the meat was in the fridge and on ice in the cooler by 9:40. So it was a very successful early season hunt. I absolutely love it. He fills the freezer for us every year. It takes, there's still pressure because last year my family ate through 4 deer and 2 elk and a bear. So we need another elk, but a lot of the pressure's off because he's, sure shot Magoo there. Like he's pretty good with it. But that story leads us into, the pertinent points, and I think we'll bounce back and forth for the next 10 minutes or so. Like with that, what are your let's start with top three. What are your, Ryan, top three things for early season hunts? Like 3 things hunters either need to know, have prepared, or be prepared for in regards to their meat care. So we're not talking how to kill the animal, how to deal with that, but once you get that animal down, your top 3.
First thing, maybe I'm the only person that's done this, but you get your animal to the truck and then you still have to drive into town to get your ice, or to cool it down, where you're like, okay, we've got this animal, it's already hot, we got to hurry up off the mountain, and who knows, you're 4 miles back or further, and you're already pushing it, and then you get to the truck and you don't have ice, or something to cool that down immediately. It's super easy to do, you're quick leaving after work, but so you don't stop and get ice, and then you shoot something and then you need the ice and you have to drive all the way into town, and so that's one that I would say is a big mistake that I've done. Is it's just like, have some ice in your truck, have a block so that you can get it in there and cool that thing down.
So pre-cool your coolers.
Yep.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would probably say that's got to be close to number 1. Like pre-cool your coolers. Like if you have 125 quart cooler, right? Big Coleman Yeti, whatever the heck it might be. If you have 3 things of block ice in the bottom of that, they don't melt as fast as the cubed ice does. They don't take up as much room, and they will cool your cooler down. And if you leave them in the bags, if you're driving home an hour, even 2 hours, you can throw your meat directly on there without putting a contractor bag. Say it's getting hot or it's nighttime and you just want to get the heck out of the mountain. You can throw your meat on there and it will still stay safe until you get home, and then you can deal with it in your garage or whatever. So I would agree with you 100%.
Right.
Pre-cool your coolers would be number 1 on my list.
Second thing, you kind of, talked about this already with your elk. You did a quick hug, you celebrated, and then you got to work. We live in an Instagram world where you want to take pictures and you want to do this and you want to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we like our pictures, but we're pretty good at getting after it. When, hunting's fun, and that's where we say the real work gets going. Like, that's where the real work begins. And so I'd say, depending on the time of year and the heat, get that thing opened up so it starts breathing out sooner than later.
Yep. Take your pictures fast. Don't celebrate too much, because I mean, I love the way Jim Huntsman on the Western Huntsman podcast said this. I think it was last year sometime. The real trophy is the meat in the freezer. Like, you could take all the pictures and have, set the head up if you kill a big bull and stand 5 foot behind it to make it look like your 120-inch bull is 400 inches, like we know a lot of people out there do. Or make it look like your 5-foot bear is an 8.5 foot black bear, even though it's only 4'8" or 5 foot, by standing 10 feet behind it and setting the pictures up. Like, we know what that's all about. Like, we get it. But if you don't have the meat in the freezer, like, that's the real trophy. So yeah, I didn't even think about that one. That's a great piece of advice. Like, take your pictures fast. They may not be the best pictures. Make sure your lens is clear. Snap a couple photos. Share your hugs. Reminisce on the stories after you get that animal done. Good show. That's a great point.
Well, and definitely if it takes you a while to find it, it's not always.
They don't always die on a logging road. Yeah, you might have to search for a couple. And if that's a great point, the longer you have to search, the less time you have once you actually get to that animal. And that actually, I didn't even think about this. That might dictate how you end up field dressing that animal. Like, if you have to search for that animal for 3 hours and the sun's up on it and it's hot and stuff, your best bet to cool it and save your meat might be to actually gut that animal and not do the gutless.
How much, if it's 8, and 80 degrees, 75 degrees. How long do you have, do you think, till that meat starts going bad?
So I have killed animals in 75, 80 degree heat, let them, shot them with an arrow, waited my 45 minutes to an hour, and then found them after an hour and 15 minutes of blood tracking. They weren't sitting in the blazing sun, they were in the forest, but it was still hot, right?
Right.
I would say you actually have more time than you think you have, right? Like, so you have more time than you think you have, but at the same time, I know this is such an oxymoron, you have less time than you think you have. Like, you can't, after taking 2.5, 3 hours to find your animal, then take pictures for an hour, FaceTime your family, show them pictures of it, and wait another hour to get started. Get started right away, but you have a good hour and a half or so to get that animal dressed. I would say, you know, in those temperatures, if you have the animal done within 4 hours, you're okay. As long as it's not in the blazing sun. I mean, if the sun's beating down on it, it's just like your car. Like, you get in your car and the temperature will read 119 when it's only 88 degrees out there. And
Right.
you got to think that animal's metabolically active. So those bones are hot and everything's rotting from the bone
Well,
out.
well, that body temperature is probably like ours, where it's already at 98 degrees. I mean,
Yes.
it's not at the 80 degrees. It's starting at 98, or
Yes.
hotter.
So I would say, do it as fast as possible, but don't rush, right? Stay calm, but move with intention and purpose. Like, when you start doing the animal, like in the morning or in the day, like midday madness, you kill an animal, um, every movement needs to be with intention. Like,
Yeah.
kind of, if you know that animal's dead and you're going to find it, like, think about the pictures you want. Like, all right, I'm going to take these like 10 pictures, then we're going to rock and roll. Then we got to get going. Like, it comes to like knowing where your kill kit is in your pack, knowing where the stuff is in your pack. Like, the most important thing is to get that meat off the animal. Like, and if that means basically unzipping your pack and turning the damn thing upside down, letting it all fall out in a dusty area so you can get the stuff fast, like, do that. Like, everything else can be washed, but the meat can't be saved once it spoils. So I would say move with intention and purpose. Don't waste time, save the stories and all that stuff, and be like, he went this way, I went that way. It's like, where'd he go? Where'd who go? Like, save those stories for the hike out that you have. Like, and when you have the knife in your hand and you're doing the cuts, like, just work. Just put your head down and work. Like, those guys that show up to work, and I'm one of those guys, show up to work at 6 a.m. and basically get their whole day's worth of work done by 8 a.m. And you're like, how in the hell did you get a whole day's worth of work done in 2 hours? It takes me 10 hours for that. And you're like, well, I wasn't on social media. I wasn't answering phone calls. I just put my head down and worked for 2 hours and I got a boatload of work done. When you
Hmm.
start cutting into that animal, just get a boatload of work done, right? Like, you don't have to rush. You don't have to cut yourself. You don't have to be negligent and leave meat on the bone, but just get the work done. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so what would be your third thing?
Um, my third thing is let it dice quick. Make a good shot. No,
Yeah.
actually, I think in the hot days, getting the meat off the bone. So if you're quartering it and it's just super, super hot, making a cut to separate it so it's not on the bone, because like you said, those bones and the inside can get super, super, super hot.
And you don't
And
even
so,
need to debone the entire meat. If you find one of the seams from that sirloin tip in either the bottom round, which people call the outside round, or the top round, which is the inside round, you can cut the seam right there. Yeah, you may cut a little bit of one of those rows, and just even exposing the bone, like, cut that seam, shave a little bit off that bone, just create that open pathway for that heat to escape, will also help. Because I hate boning meat out in the field. Absolutely hate it. I hate the way it carries in my pack. I don't like the way that it ages. I don't like butchering it when it's off the bone. It's messy. It's never as clean. It's not, I can't get as good at cuts being a butcher. I'd prefer it on the bone. but I'm also not going to sacrifice meat to leave it on the bone. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I agree with all those. I would say my three, and I
Let's
learned this
hear it.
time. The number one thing, your knife, your field knife, should be sharp enough to shave hair off your arm. If your field knife is not sharp enough to shave hair off your arm, it is when this comes out, it'll be what, August 12th. So 3 weeks until opener
Yeah.
for most people. Send your knife back to Benchmade, back to Montana Knife Company, back to Buck, wherever. It will take 3 days to get there. Have them sharpen it. Put a little note in there and say, please make it sharp enough to shave hair off my arm. A sharp knife will go so far. If you have to resharpen your knife before you're done making your initial cuts through the hide, you're in a world of hurt. Like, you are capital S screwed if you have to touch that knife up a bunch while you're doing it. Like a super sharp knife, which is one of the reasons I actually like fixed blade knives more than the replaceable blades. And I know you like replaceable blades, but
Oh yeah.
I don't like having to take the extra 3 minutes to replace the blade. Sharp as all get up. I always have a Havalon with me or an Outdoor Edge just as a backup in case I need it. But I don't like taking the time. I can sharpen them, just touch them up on the work sharp sharpener faster. But start with a knife that's sharp enough to shave hair off your arm would be my number one, like top three. The second one,
Okay, that makes
and
sense.
I should have done this. I've done it in the past, and for some reason I didn't do it on this hunt. Maybe it's whatever. I don't know why. But I was talking with my buddy Trevor up at Compass Grade Labradors out of Calgary, and we're getting one of his dogs next year. And we were talking because he's going on hunts starting in another like 12 or 14 days. Carry for those early season hunts, carry a Ziploc bag full of coarse ground black pepper. Go to Costco and get it's $7.99. I just bought a bunch. Get a bag of coarse ground black pepper, the container, and dump it in a Ziploc baggie. And when you pull that hide off and start making your cuts, sprinkle black pepper all over the meat. It keeps the yellow jackets and bald-faced hornets away like you wouldn't believe. And when you bring it home and you're going to butcher your meat anyway, you're going to cut that silver skin and everything off. So you're going to, all those black pepper flakes, those coarse ground flakes are going to come off. It's not like salt. It's not flavoring your meat. It's not pulling moisture out. It's just sitting on there, keeping all of those away. So that would be definitely an insider's pro tip. The baggie of coarse ground black pepper. Like, we all deal with some meat bees. We call them meat bees. They're yellow jackets. Like, but if you're in an area and it's hot, like in this year, at least in northern Idaho, they're particularly bad. Everybody I've been talking to is like, man, the yellow jackets are worse than I've ever seen them. And it would take up what, like 4 ounces in your pack. Put it with your cook kit or whatever, just a bag of coarse ground black pepper, and sprinkle it liberally over the meat that you're about to cut out. That would be probably the main thing to save you from having anaphylactic shock or getting stung 17 times and having to have your kid carry out 3/4 of the elk that he shot.
Well,
Um,
yeah. Well, and you could just put it in your kill kit even, so it's
Absolutely.
doesn't take you time to get it out.
Right next to the Rice Krispie treat that you have in your kill kit that we talked about last year on the essentials. So yeah, coarse ground black pepper and a Rice Krispie treat, you're good to go. Third thing, I would go back to your number one. Have ice in your cooler. Have your coolers cooled down. Like, have a plan. Like, if your coolers are cooled down, it's great. I mean, it, everybody up here, and by up here I mean in Idaho and where we're at in the inland Northwest and Western
Mm-hmm.
United States, we get so uptight about temperatures, killing animals in heat. I mean, there's posts if you're on Facebook pages and stuff like, oh, these early season hunts are ridiculous. It's a way for, landowners to not have elk. All that elk meat gets lost. I could tell you, I mean, I've been doing this hunt for a long time, and I have never lost an ounce of meat. And I've killed animals on days with, I mean, the day Luke killed was an excessive heat warning day, and we didn't lose an ounce of meat. I've never, ever, and I know people are reading this, be like, well, no crap, he didn't. He's the cut right mobile expert. He knows what he's doing. That's why we put that app together, so that you know what you're doing. But if you have a few essentials and you work with purpose and you get those quarters off, whether you do it, super cleanly or not, if your cooler's cooled down, that meat's going to be completely fine, right? Like, it's the post care, like, take care of that meat. Like, if you don't want to bone it out in the field and you get it back and like, you don't know what I'm talking about, you don't have the app for some reason, and you don't know where those seams are, I would rather cut through the sirloin tip, cut it in half to not lose any of it than keep it whole and lose some of it. Like,
Right.
cut through the thing, expose the bone, get it out there. But where I was going with that anecdotally, last year I hunted in Maui. It was 92 degrees. I killed multiple deer down in Maui, multiple axis deer, and it was hot, like hot, like Hawaii, like between the mountains in the valley by the airport, hot, like hot. And we killed the animals, packed that meat out, and the guy I was with had his coolers full of ice and just set that meat directly on the ice. And me being, he's an elk hunter. He comes back to actually Idaho and hunts every year. I was like, oh, you can't just set the meat on the ice. Like, isn't that going to ruin the meat? And he's like, would you rather have your meat be a little bit wet or lose meat because I don't have ice in the cooler and you throw it in the back of the truck? I'm like, forget it. Put that meat on the ice. Like, we'll be good. We'll deal with that. I mean, get that meat cooled off. So one of my top three goes back to one of your top three, like, have ice in the cooler, stop on the way. And it's just one of those things. It's a pain in the butt. Like, maybe you go out and you're like, yeah, I probably won't kill anything tonight. I'm not going to stop and get ice. Like, just stop and get ice. Just stop and get $12 worth of ice for the bottom of your cooler,
Well, and even if it's that hard, just have ice packs in your freezer and just throw them in there,
or
like
frozen water bottles. And that way, if
Yeah.
they thaw, you can drink them. Like, just freeze some water bottles, man.
Well,
So
and that keeps your cooler dry.
absolutely. And it makes it, you're right,
So
it makes it a lot easier to clean. So, dude, those are five fantastic tips that
5 tips.
people should definitely take to heart. Sharp knife, black pepper, cool coolers. What do you got?
Cool coolers, spend less time taking pictures and getting to work.
Yep.
And getting that that meat off of the bone.
I love it.
Just to save it. So
I love it. Maybe maybe next week. Maybe next week. Since it'll probably be the week right before people start heading out, we'll give them some more, like, you walk up to your animal on the ground. What's a great order of operations? Like, what do you think about first? Like, what are the things you want to do first? Like, go through some of that. Like, they can put it on as they're listening. Maybe they can save it to their phone, so when they're taking their afternoon nap and sitting on a herd of animals, they can listen and be like, all right, what am I going to do first? I forget what the hell that guy said. So we can go through that a little bit.
No, that's great. I like it. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you another time.
Thanks, guys.